How we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here, welcome back to another video. So the alpha invites are officially out there. I can confirm that I was not fortunate enough to get in this time round. Blizzard, my DMs are open if you want to throw me some love. But that isn't going to stop me talking about some of the profession changes and one very specific blue post that landed yesterday with a pretty big change to how the professions are going to work in the new expansion. So I wanted to take a few minutes out of your day today to have a little bit of a run through this ever so quickly, talk about how this might impact the professions going into the War Within, and more importantly, share some small feedback on this. Now, a lot of the videos I produce for you guys, I am talking to you guys. I'm talking to the general player base, the people who watch these videos, but I might twist the format of this video a little bit, just more so focusing it in a feedback-centric way. This might ultimately mean that some of my takes are more generalized for the overall player base rather than just from the perspective of goblins. So leave me your thoughts on it down below. But one thing that was very clear throughout most of Dragonflight is that inspiration was a touch busted, right? It felt very, very overpowered. It kind of circumvented, created loopholes for some of the systems. It meant that you could, instead of using Artisan's Metal, you could just recraft things a few times, as your inspiration could be stacked to such a degree that it became beneficial to do it that way. It created some weird stuff, and I think Blizzard agreed with this, and this is hence why they've stepped in and they are changing how inspiration works. Now, even if you have alpha access right now, this hasn't been implemented on the alpha. I suspect this will probably turn up in the next couple of weeks. But it's a cool heads up that they've at least thought about this. They've clearly known about the problems throughout Dragonflight, and they're showcasing that they are going to address them. So let's have a little bit of a look then. Greetings, members of the Artisans Consortium. As we reveal much of the content coming with the War Within, we want to discuss one of the new systems we're cooking up for professions. Inspiration. They added it in Dragonflight to try and capture the fantasy of critical hits whilst crafting. If you weren't quite capped out on your gear or your specializations for a given craft, or if you weren't using the max quality reagents to guarantee that max quality item, inspiration was a way to get that lucky crit. It could save you some money by using the lower quality reagents, which were often cheaper, and you could craft a better item than you would otherwise normally. That was the hope, at least. That was the theory. That's kind of what they dreamt up for inspiration anyway. But it ended up, understandably, becoming a situation where crafters would take this luck-based system and just pass that on to the buyers, basically. Tell their customers that they would recraft something an indeterminate number of times until that proc happens, and then charge based upon how many rerolls had happened. So they think that's dumb. I've always thought that process was dumb, but sometimes the dumb way is the right way of doing things, and so hence why all the crafters did it. We're making some changes because of this, or because there is a lack of decision making and agency for the crafter. Crafters were kind of offloading the problem. They were offloading the problem, saying, well, look, I've got this much inspiration. Based on that, there's a 30 or 40% chance I'll make the thing you actually want. Keep sending it to me until it magically happens. The choice of the crafter should have been different than that. They shouldn't have been able to offload the problem, I think. There's then, because of that, a lack of clarity for the customers who want those items made. How weird is it for you looking to buy a piece of gear when somebody says, well, there's a 35% chance you can have that, otherwise you might have to send it to me again and it might cost you more. It's not very clear, not very transparent, and not very user-friendly, really. And it was based heavily on RNG. You know, a dice roll, once again, which they claim was not the goal of the profession revamp. Yet, that said, there is kind of a little bit of RNG all over the place nowadays. So, in the War Within, they are removing inspiration. See you later. Gone. It's going. But in its place, we have something new for crafters, and this is what they're calling concentration. Concentration is going to be a resource. You are going to have a separate pool of concentration for each crafting profession. I'll talk about my thoughts on this in a minute, but it's a bit ambiguous at the moment. We are not sure if this is going to be per character or if this is going to be a warband situation. Is it going to be that you have a tailoring, you have concentration for tailoring, and does that mean that if you have 3 or 4 tailors, you have 3 or 4 different concentration resources for those tailors, or is it going to be just an account-wide thing? This is a little bit unclear. Maybe we'll find out, but I'll talk about my thoughts on that in a minute. It represents your ability to heavily focus your recipes and exceed your normal capabilities. You choose when you want to concentrate using a button in your crafting window, and it will empower your next craft. Doing so will cause the craft to reach the next level of quality, no questions asked. So it's kind of removing the RNG aspect. It's going to be, right, okay, if I want to guarantee something at top quality, now I use this button. I'm going to concentrate when I do this craft, and I'm going to make sure I get it right. This feels like it's trying to replace Artisan's Metal, because of course Artisan's Metal, you could turn it into Illustrious Insight, which would give you plus 30 skill, which was often enough for you to then say, well, okay, now with that extra skill, I know I will guarantee it. But as we've already mentioned, people kind of skirted around that system. However, such a heavy focus can take a toll, costing you some of your profession's concentration resource. The cost is determined by how far away you are from crafting that next quality tier. So if you are miles away, let's assume we're trying to craft a quality 5 piece of gear here. If you are miles away from actually being able to guarantee it, it's going to take you a lot more of your concentration to actually achieve it. But if you're close, but you're only a little bit away, you're not going to need much concentration. You're only going to need to focus a little bit to get that extra power, to get that top quality craft. This is going to play a part in the sort of progression of the professions, it feels. This can be modified with some variables such as your specializations, finishing reagents, or whether you are crafting consumables, reagents, or actual equipment. So there's a bit of nuance to how much concentration it's going to take to guarantee that top quality stuff, but it's going to be flexible. Illustrious Insight and Artisan's Metal by proxy of that was always like plus X amount of skill. It was always a fixed amount. This time it will mean you only need to use a little concentration sometimes and maybe a lot other times, but you get to choose how that works. So, for example, if you are incredibly close to being able to craft that max quality sword, you won't have to concentrate too hard to finish the project. However, if you're just barely able to craft the same sword at quality 3, you might have to devote a lot of your concentration to craft it at quality 4. Such a very odd example to use here based upon the fact that nobody cares about quality 3, Blizzard. But anyway, an example is an example. For those that want to focus on ingenious breakthroughs when concentrating, we also have a new stat to support your endeavors: Ingenuity. So, Inspiration is directly being replaced with Ingenuity. The stats will be interchangeable. Ingenuity stats, we'll talk about how I feel about the Ingenuity stat in a minute, but Concentration is the new system, the new resource that you get to spend when crafting gear. Ingenuity is actually the stat that replaces Inspiration. Ingenuity will give you a chance to refund any concentration spent on that craft. The more ingenuity you have, the higher your chance that you'll get that full refund. This is one thing that did sort of lead us to some questions today. Is it going to be a full refund if Ingenuity procs? There's the RNG aspect back again. If Ingenuity procs, is it going to give you all of the concentration that you needed? Meaning an Ingenuity proc on something that you're miles away from is way more powerful than an Ingenuity proc on something that you're only missing slightly. Some balance there maybe. Outside of these Ingenuity-fueled refunds, concentration will also automatically regenerate over time when you aren't sitting at its cap. So I guess anybody that's played with any of the alchemy transmutes over, or the tailoring cooldowns over Dragonflight, will be aware of the fact that, you know, you regenerate charges. It's probably not going to be a charge system, as they've already called it a resource, but we suspect you'll have X amount of concentration, and it will take a period of time for that resource to regenerate after you've used it. Our goal is to provide crafters with a more deterministic way to accomplish the original objective and intent behind inspiration without loopholing it. You can use it to shore up the lack of skill, your lack of gear, or by using max quality reagents while still making higher quality crafts. Maybe you just want to save some money by using lower quality reagents in a craft so you can otherwise guarantee at maximum quality. Either way, we want to give crafters more agency over their crafting, provide more room for decision making in the profession ecosystem, and provide a resource that you can use without having to give your customers a full statistical breakdown. E.g., meaning you don't have to try and sell the fact you have 40+% inspiration and hope that, you know, as a buyer of a piece of gear, it was always weird when, you know, you would find people that say crafting with 45% inspiration, and you just kind of had to trust that they did, and you kind of had to trust that they didn't swap out their resourcefulness tool when crafting to drive more recrafts. Yeah, it wasn't good, so I'm glad that they've changed it in that regard. The system's currently being implemented and will become testing in the future. So that's the overview of concentration and the new stat ingenuity. That's probably the portion of the video for you guys that are my regular viewers, getting the information out there. Now's the little bit that I'm going to go into where I talk a little bit more directly to Blizzard, as I think this is a good implementation, and I do think there are some subtle other changes to the rest of the profession system that might be needed for this to like really hit and actually work as intended. So I did make some notes. If you watched the stream earlier today, you'll have seen these already, but we did make some notes today, and there's a couple of things that I want to go through in regards to how I personally feel about this. Number one, I really do think that this concentration should be a warband or an account-wide resource. It was very, very quick for players to jump to the conclusion, well, the loophole to this is just to have a bunch of alts. And especially going into an expansion where alt armies per se, or flexibility with alts, is seemingly something that they're focusing on. It very, very quickly feels that if you just have 5 tailors, all of a sudden you have 5 concentration bars for your tailoring. That instantly sort of gives you the same advantage as what you previously had, which I kind of feel is what they were trying to prevent in the first place by making this change. Just having 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 blacksmiths of any sort of profession, for example, could easily get around this concentration limit, and it is seemingly a limit that they're trying to impose on crafters. They're trying to say that if you want to be crafting the best things, you can, but there's a limit to how much of the very best stuff you can make. Players with lots of characters will instantly get around this, and worst case scenario is they won't have to level their professions anywhere near as deep or as far, because they won't care about the limitations of concentration as much. If you have one character, if you have a tailor and you have 1 concentration bar, your goal is to use as little of it as possible each and every time you do use it. Meaning you're going to want to push that one tailor to its absolute limits, or that one profession to its absolute limits. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 tailors, you're not constricted by this concentration mechanic anywhere near as much, meaning you don't need to push your skill anywhere near as much. So it's a bit weird. My take on this is that I think that it should be a warband-wide resource. The lore side of things feels a bit odd, I know. If you want to have one character that's specialised in one direction, making weapons, another character that also takes blacksmithing but specialises in armour, there is still the argument to say that they probably should have their own concentration bar. But maybe this is something that needs to be considered. I don't think it should be per player. I personally think it should be per warband, but we'll see. The one thing I will say is, please, for the love of all that is holy, make sure it's not exploitable. Look how easily broken the cooldown mechanics were for the bolts, for tailoring, for all of the alchemy transmutes on their initial implementations. This system clearly seems to be something that's to replace a broken system already, so let's make sure that it's definitely not broken in its first initial implementation. That's maybe my glass is half empty approach a little bit here, but please, let's make sure it works. This is why I think alpha feedback is kind of important. Some other things that I think are going to need to be maybe thought about at the very least. I've labelled this a hot take because I know this causes people to riot. But I have the feeling that this mechanic will work at its best if they make it so that you can't guarantee quality 5 crafts any other way. We had a lot of this kind of like sometimes but not always problem with the crafting professions in Dragonflight. You could get very close to reaching maximum, but you couldn't quite ever cross the finish line on a lot of crafts, and it felt odd, it felt weird, and it felt frustrating for crafters because you would put all of your effort into trying to level that as high as you possibly can, and just as you get to the finish line you realize that you can't actually ever cross the finish line. There was never a way for you to guarantee the top quality stuff. I would like, if they're going to take that approach, if you are sort of forewarned that, let's say, quality 4 for crafted gear is as high as you're going to be able to guarantee, the only way you get quality 5 is by using this concentration resource. If they do it that way, it's a lot more clear, it's a lot more easy to understand, and it might remove a lot of that frustration of getting close but never crossing the finish line. A lot of players, and I can already hear some of you typing this out in the comments, a lot of players want the flexibility of being able to guarantee top quality crafts all the time, but I think the reason there is this system in the first place is to make it so that those players can't do that, right? It feels like they want to make the professions a little bit fairer for everybody. We all would love to stand there and craft max quality gear and sell max quality gear all day long, but every one person that does that, if you think about it from the game-wide perspective, every one person that dominates a single market, for every one person that does that, there's probably a handful of people that don't ever get a chance to ever really play with the professions properly. They take all this time and effort leveling them up, but then they kind of then can never really ever make any gold from utilizing it. They never feel as if they're getting the most out of it. That one person winning really heavily is actually at the cost of many others, I think, and this is why it feels like they're trying to even everything out. They're trying to make sure that you can do max quality stuff, but you are heavily limited to how much of it you can do, making it a little bit fairer for everybody. If you choose to make, you make your couple of max quality pieces of gear for somebody, then your time is done. You got to take a step back. You can still make the lower rank stuff for people if they so desire it, but you've had your piece of the pie. For the rest of however long it takes for your concentration to recuperate, you give somebody else an opportunity. That can easily be achieved by adjusting the amount of skill you can get with different professions to make it just abundantly obvious that you are never going to be able to guarantee quality 5 unless you're using concentration. The difficulty of this is it means that Blizzard, you kind of probably want to make it so that there is a world where quality 4 is considered more acceptable. I know players play this game with the mindset of nothing but the best everything else is dog shit, right? There's this kind of concept that top quality or nothing. BIS lists are a thing. People always want this, but I think the best way would be is if they can somehow, if Blizzard can somehow make it so that quality 4 is deemed more than acceptable and will do the job perfectly well, but the quality 5, the concentration, the perfect version, the, dare I use the word, Titan Forged version of a piece of gear that comes from this concentration is a nice to have, but not truly necessary. I don't know how they do that. A couple of ideas that got put forward on stream today could be having things like the quality 4 and the quality 5 be the same item level, potentially the same main stats on the piece of gear, but a quality 5 might give you some tertiary stats. It might give you some plus speed or some leech on it instead, sort of squishing the power differential between quality 4s and quality 5. People would still like to have the quality 5s and would probably pay a small premium for them, but the quality 4 stuff that can be guaranteed by most players most of the time is still, as I sort of quoted, acceptable. Let me know what you think about that. That's probably the most controversial part of my opinions on all of this. Some other notes that I think needs to probably happen with professions to really make this concentration system work is the hidden skill value. I wonder how many people who will watch this don't even really know that there is a hidden skill value. If you've used add-ons like Craft Sim, or you've engaged yourself quite deep into like the crafting and the profession system in Dragonflight, you might be aware that there's this random bonus skill roll whenever you press the craft button, and it can give you between 1 to 5% bonus skill. And sometimes this has been very heavily abused by people that get really, really close to guaranteeing quality 5 or guaranteeing top quality 3 reagents, but can't quite cross the finish line. You could push close enough so that this hidden skill value would actually give you significantly more top quality crafts than, like, a lot more Q3s as opposed to Q2s, for example. It's gross. It's gross. I don't think anybody's ever really liked it. People that know that it exists have taken advantage of it. You stack this with racials as well, and there's been some weird situations in Dragonflight where some players with the right racial and the right skill setup, and knowing that this hidden skill value exists, have been able to create significantly more top quality stuff than other players. It just seems unfair, is the honest answer. If it wants to stay in the game, Blizzard needs to at least tell people it exists. At the bare minimum, they should tell people it exists. The fact that it's completely secretive, the fact that it's completely hidden, there's no reference to it whatsoever in the game, and you have to have got pretty sweaty with spreadsheets or add-ons to even figure out that it's a thing. Just get rid of it. It's my approach, get rid of it. That leads me on to the racials as well. We know that the racial for the human reputation boost, diplomacy, is being changed. I actually think that the racials giving plus skill to the professions as well has been more problematic than it's worth for professions in Dragonflight. It feels like the last sort of lingering element of the old crafting system. Now that we've not only had the new crafting system in Dragonflight, but we're iterating on it for the War Within, I feel it's time to either get rid of the racial bonuses for professions or switch them to more secondary stat style-y stuff. Give some classes a bonus to their crafting speed. Might still make use to be an alchemist with that crafting speed, but at least you're not making stuff at a significantly higher quality or at a cheaper price than everybody else. You could use some of the secondary stats as racial bonuses. That feels more fair, I think. Let's talk about how this might integrate with work orders. I could probably do an entire separate video on the work orders, but I just want to say that this would be a really good time at Blizzard to let players choose quality on public orders. Only though, if some of the other things are also done. I know many other people know that putting quality on public orders is something that everybody wanted, but there are some pretty big reasons to why it wasn't implemented, I think. One of the biggest reasons being is you can't, if you put quality on public orders, everybody's going to put quality 5. You'd be a moron to not want the best quality, right? That makes a lot of sense. But because the way the system was designed in Dragonflight, because the system was designed so that you couldn't actually guarantee quality 5 a lot of time, but that information wasn't very well translated to players, you couldn't then... You couldn't put quality on public orders because nobody would be able to fill any of them. It was a messy situation. This is the best time, categorically the best time to fix that. Put quality on public orders, but try and do this at the same time. Try and make a world where people might actually see some difference between ordering a Q4 and a Q5. If it's such that Q4s can be guaranteed by people quite quickly, quite efficiently, people might quickly learn that if they put in a Q4 quality 4 public order, it'll probably get filled almost instantly. But if they put a quality 5 public order in, which is going to require somebody's concentration to use, it might take a little bit longer. There might be less crafters out there that can fill it. You might also need to tip a little bit more generously to get that. So that might be the kiss-curse situation for allowing public work orders to have quality. I don't know exactly how that would play out in reality. We are guessing a little bit here. But now would be a really good time to implement that because people really want it. Might make a little bit of a bidding war on the quality 5 stuff early season because, like I said, restrictions in how many people can actually make that quality 5 stuff. People will put in orders for Q4 if they just want the thing quickly, which is kind of why you use public orders anyway. This also leads me on to region-wide work orders. It feels like with the warband system going into place, this would be a really good time to also make, at the very least, public orders region-wide. I can see the logic for having personal orders still be realm only, but public orders with warbands, with so much else going region-wide, it feels like a really, really good time to make them region-wide as well. There's already a problem that on the smaller servers, there's actually sometimes not enough crafters, and even a public order can sit there for a while. Now would be a good time. Make it region-wide, at least for public orders, maybe even personal orders as well, considering how well warbands are working. And on top of that, just a very little small side note, if this concept of Q4 being acceptable and Q5 being the nice to have exists, then maybe public recrafts would also really help. Being able to maybe get your Q4 item nice and quickly, and then next week, maybe when people are charging a little bit less for the Q5s because it's not so early season, you can put your item in for a recraft and it will come back to you the next day, upgraded to quality 5 all the same. So that's some of my little initial thoughts on how this system could be implemented. A last few little notes I'll put here. Duration in which I think your concentration should replenish. It needs to be slow. The player base, I don't think, is going to like this concept, but I think for it to work effectively and to actually do the thing it's designed to do, I think the recharge rate of the concentration needs to be really slow. Let's say you use 100% of your concentration. I think it should probably take 1 week to fully recharge back up to 100%. This would mean, I believe, that in the early season, in the early part of the expansion, when people are still leveling up their professions, they might need to use quite a lot of their concentration on one single craft. They might be so far away from top quality that they need to use a lot of concentration when they choose to do it. But I also think that to make it fair so that many players who play with the professions can get an equal chance at getting one of these top quality concentration crafts in with a real player, they should make it so that you can't do more than a couple of them per week. So the recharge rate, I think, has got to be quite slow. It will also mean when players do inevitably get much better and they collect all their knowledge points and they get more skilled in their professions, each and every time they go to craft something, they're going to use an ever smaller amount of their concentration. So let's say they end up using only 20% of their concentration for a single craft. You don't want to be in a situation where people can then just go back to how it has been in Dragonflight, where they can just craft stuff continuously, because every few hours their concentration is replenished enough that they can go again, for example. So I think this is only initial thoughts. I think the recharge rate needs to be slow. A full week, a full a calendar reset per se, to go from 0 to 100 feels about right to me, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And ingenuity, my final point, because I'm already aware that this video has gone on way too long already. This was meant to be a quick overhaul, quick little catch-up video, but ingenuity, I think it needs to be a small percentage. I've run some sort of napkin maths on this, and it feels like maybe a baseline value of only 5% feels good. But maybe if you use your spec trees and stack some profession tools or whatever, I wouldn't really want to see ingenuity going much past 25% chance. For the reasons I mentioned a minute ago, that when you get really good at your professions, you're going to use less concentration anyway. So as you get better in your profession, you're going to rely on ingenuity technically far less. So if you're also able to stack your ingenuity too far, you'll not only be using less of it, you'll be getting it refunded more frequently, and it will be like extending your concentration bar miles and miles and miles. And once again, we'll get back into the situation that we're trying to get out of in the first place, of being able to just continuously craft top quality gear for everybody. There we go. Boys and girls, regular viewers of mine, thank you very much for sticking around. If you made it to the 30+ minute mark, I do appreciate it. If I'm shooting for the moon here that a Blizzard dev even watches this and pays any interest to it whatsoever. If you do, I hope my feedback is appreciated. Do with it as you please. Feel free to let me know if you want any more thoughts. Also, please feel free to tell me if I'm just batshit crazy wrong. That's also entirely possible. But I'll leave it there for today, boys and girls. Thank you all for watching. Remember to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing if you're new around here. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.